So today's session is Macquarie Bank have been benchmarking for 13 years across accounting, financial services, legal services, mortgage and insurance broking firms of all sizes and varying levels of progress throughout the business cycle. We benchmark to compare performance against peers and industry leaders with actionable insights for day-to-day operations and long-term strategic planning. To build a business focused on the client, you need a highly skilled and motivated team, empowered with technology and systems optimised for efficiencies. So your speaker for this session is Elise Quillam. As part of the client development team at Macquarie Virtual Advisor Network, Elise works with a number of firms to develop and execute their strategies to maximise opportunities and accelerate their business growth. Her key areas of expertise include business and language psychology, client research and relationship management. She also has been widely recognised as a speaker within the wealth industry, sharing her knowledge and insights on behavioural psychology and finance, which she's gathered over the past 10 years. Would you please join me in welcoming Elise?
Thank you so much. Now I need to live up to my introduction, and I seem to have drawn quite a crowd. I'm quite proud of this. Thank you for joining me for the next hour or so to talk through the blueprint of a successful advice firm. I promise to make this as educational and as entertaining as I possibly can, because there's one thing that I know from a psychology perspective is that I could talk your ear off for the next hour and you will be lucky to walk away with maybe 2 or 3 nuggets of gold, hopefully, that you will be able to remember, let alone implement into your business, firm or practice. And so I want to start today's session with a question. I want to ask you, who in this room, although these lights are blinding me at the moment, so I don't know who I'll be able to see, who in this room has run a marathon before? There's a few. Good on you, my God, like power to you. I need to know your willpower and your skills around doing so. The reason I ask this question is because when we were creating the content for this session, the introduction said it all. We've been doing benchmarking for a long period of time. We've been doing research for a long period of time. And obviously, I want to share some of that with you. But at the same time, I want to make sure that you remember and you actually take something away. And so I was thinking about how's the best way that I can actually make this and distill this down by taking it away from our industry for just a second. And I thought about a marathon. My husband has run 6 marathons. He ran 4 of them before we had met, and then he proceeded to run another 2, or has run another 2, since we've been together and had 2 small young children. And so I've been really fascinated by this idea of what is it, it's about setting the goal, about writing the plan, about execution, around getting to where it is that you want to be in your end state. And so I wanted to just take a couple of minutes to think about this from, because this is all about being a successful firm, but I want to use the example of running a marathon. And so I watched my husband put together his training plan, his execution strategy, set his goals, work out who on his team that he needed. So I was obviously part of that sort of cheer squad, giving him the time and the space that he needed to do all of his training and preparation. And I watched him put this plan together. And he had an element of confidence about him because what is with the writing thing? Because he'd run marathons before. And so he put his plan together and he started to execute on it. And within probably 3 or 4 weeks, he came to me and he said, Elise, I think this plan is wrong. And I went, well, I couldn't help you with that because I can barely run 2K. I said, tell me why. I'm fascinated. And he said, I feel myself getting fitter, but I don't feel like I'm edging towards the goal of actually being able to do this. I don't feel myself losing the weight that I need to feel. I don't feel I'm really struggling with the injury that he carries in his calves. He said, I think the plan is all wrong. And so he needed to sit down and replan and re-look at his life, because what he had failed to take into account is that he had, like I said, an injury in his calf that he still carries to this day. It rips all the time. And he's got we have two small young children, 4 and 2 years old. And so his energy levels are not the same as what they were probably the last time that he ran his last marathon before we had kids. And so I started to reflect on this story, because putting this session together, I thought to myself, well, what really does make a successful firm? What really does make a successful practice? And I want to ask you these questions as we go through. But there's really one thing that comes to mind for me, and it's having a plan and a strategy and the execution skills to actually carry it out. So whilst I can share with you all of the things that are going to be really important and we know that are really important, and we're going to cover like CVP or client value proposition, like having a plan for scalable growth and efficiencies, having the right team and the right culture. If you don't have a plan for all of these, there is no point having any of that, as my husband really found out. Right? And we need to make sure that not only do you have a plan, but it's one that you can actually execute on and it has realistic opportunity for you to actually put into place. And so with that in mind, I wanted to talk to you about what our objectives are for today's session. And so I want to take the opportunity to share with you my thoughts on how do you actually get a touch point on where you are today. What is your current state? Because only then are you going to be able to decide what your realistic strategic options actually are. All right? And this is not just where you are at in your business, but where are you in your personal life? Why is being in business important to you? Why is building a successful practice important to you? A successful career, whether you're actually the majority shareholder or an owner of a practice or a firm, is irrelevant in this case. You need to know where you currently are. So I'm going to give you some skills and some thoughts as to how to actually have that conversation with your team and with yourself today. Objective number 2 is understanding what makes a successful advice firm. And actually, I want to hear from you. I don't want to hear all of our benchmarking. It all comes from all of you. It doesn't come from us. I've had the great pleasure of working in this industry now for over a decade, and I love what I do. But at the end of the day, I get all of my insights from you. They don't come from me. So I want to share with you what we've seen, but I also want to hear from you. So you're not getting away too lightly, by the way, without talking. Just because I can't see you, I can still hear you. And then objective number 3 is that where are you going to invest your time? As I said to you at the start of this session, you're only going to take a few, hopefully golden nuggets away from any of the sessions that you hear in the next, you've already heard and that you're going to hear for the remainder of the Congress. I want to make sure that the 1 or 2 that you take away from this session, that you actually go back and you actually implement. All right? So I want to talk to you about the absolute power of having a deliberate, documented strategy. So this is where I'm going to turn it to you. What makes a business successful? It seems such a basic question. Just because there's lots of you here, I'm still going to call on you. So what does it? There's no right or wrong answer. It's a question that I ask whether I'm having a one-on-one conversation or whether I'm speaking to a big group of people. It does not matter. I'm really keen to hear how do you define a successful business? You've heard from me already. Yes. Oh, how are you? Ability to adapt. Yep, ability to adapt to changing circumstances, 100%. I love that. Thank you. Great people, absolutely. Great people, great culture, perfect. What else? You can come up here. A deliberate documented strategy. Drive, yes. What else? Impact. Impact for your clients, yeah. In society, 100%. Yes. Clear purpose and values. I love it. I feel like I've got a really talkative bunch and it makes me very happy. Clients referring. So this idea of having this stream of new business, organic growth strategy, 100%. Do you know what? One of these things, or none of these things I can actually argue with, because they're all incredibly important to building business success. Then I have to ask the question is, how do you actually ensure that all of this happens? Because we know that there's businesses out there that are driving all of this success, that are driving all of these initiatives, that it's happening. It might not be happening in every single one of your businesses, in every single one of your teams, but it's happening out there in multiple businesses, hundreds, thousands, millions of businesses across the world, not just in our industry, but globally, in multiple different industries. So we know it's possible. How are they making it all happen? They've got a plan. That's it. You've got to sit down and plan for it. Right. So I'm very sorry to disappoint anybody that thought I was going to, you were all going to walk away with a really beautiful presentation pack with all the little things that you needed to do. But this is the biggest one that I can encourage you to do as we go through today's session. Find the time to plan what it is that you want to achieve, why it's important to you, and what you're going to do about it. Because going back to the marathon story, which I didn't really finish, and for those that have run a marathon will know this. It's one thing to turn around and say, I'm going to run a marathon. Great. I can say that. Chances are I'm never going to do it. All right? But that's my goal. That's my BHAG, or my big, hairy, audacious goal. Right? But what am I going to do to ensure that I actually get there? Now, some people will turn around to me and say, well, you just get out and you run. And you'd be absolutely right. And what normally happens to people that start out on this big plan of going and getting fit or running a marathon, what happens after 2 or 3 weeks? You stop running. Why? It's hard. But you're not making, well, you feel you're not making progress? Absolutely. That's generally my reason for stopping. But also going back to my husband's issue, and he had experience, which is why it's a great story for this room, is that he had experience running marathons, but he had not taken into account that he has now got 2 kids that he has to work his schedule around. He's got injury, he's getting older, all right? He has different priorities now, and so we need to make sure that when we are planning, that we're actually taking into consideration everything that we need to make a success. And so it's not just about setting a goal and then just going for it. Our brain makes 35,000 decisions every single day. Does that stat blow your mind? It does mine. Right? Most of those decisions are beyond our conscious level. Right? So things like when we breathe, when we blink, all that sort of thing. Right? But think about how many of those 35,000 decisions that you're making every day, you're making about your business. Would you like to think that you're making them in a fully informed way, heading towards a fully formed goal? So you can achieve all of the things of what you've just told me makes a business successful. It is all about the decisions that you make and making sure that you're heading in the same direction, that each decision builds on the next. And you cannot do that without a plan. Is there any questions, thoughts, comments, arguments? I love a heckle.
I think you have to get why.
Well,
People drop out after 3 weeks and get why they're doing it.
do you know what? That is a, thank you, Phil. Look, the why is a really important piece. It sounds really fluffy, and I talk about why quite a lot, and I do touch on it here. Probably it's hard to build an hour when there's so many things and important things you can talk about when you're talking about building a successful advice firm. Your why is probably the most important. We're going to talk about having that vision. If you don't know, and that's why when I said our objective 1 was working out where you're at today, it's about being honest with yourself, because it is hard sometimes to continue to get up and get out of bed every day if you can't remember why it is that you're actually doing it. All right? It's not fluffy, it's actually incredibly important. So we will be covering that. I wanted to share with you some of the roadblocks. Now, this is really interesting because we did our benchmarking survey before COVID, and our last one just literally come out just after I had given my slides over. So we can talk about some of the themes, all right, but some of the numbers are going to be different. For those that are interested in the benchmarking survey that's just recently come out, you can obviously come to the Macquarie stand after and we can share that with you. But there's some interesting points in here, okay? Roadblocks that we still see, right, all the time, is that this idea of getting clear direction or having clear direction, being pulled in too many directions at once. And I am gonna keep coming back to it, is because if you don't have a clear direction of where it is that you want to achieve, all of these individual decisions that are leading you down a path, what will happen is it's kind of like if I want to get from here, so being in Adelaide, and I want to get back to Melbourne. First of all, I need to know where I'm going. I'm going to Melbourne. I need to know why I want to go to Melbourne, because I live there. Now, I could take a scenic route. I could take probably 100 different ways. There's no right or wrong way of getting there. But the last thing I want to do is go round in circles. Do you know how many people I see go round in circles? Yeah, all right. So this whole idea of getting and having clear direction. And you can see, obviously, the difference there, which, by the way, is only just, it's been exaggerated. So all these results here have been stretched, and you'll see that in the benchmarking report for those that read it following today's session. All right. So here, 32% of practice principles are impacted by stress or fatigue. That's only going up. All right. So sustainable growth. Right, we talked about the idea of a blueprint of a successful advice firm, and all of this stuff is incredibly important, and having this sustainable growth, organic growth, clients referring, right? Having a fully developed, articulate value proposition is one that we see a lot of firms really struggle with. And for those, by the way, if there's anything that we touch on today that I don't go into detail with, I would be more than happy to speak to any one of you following today's session. As you can probably tell, I love a chat and I love sharing my insights and knowledge, and sharing what I hear from other people like yourselves in the industry, and so I can delve into any of these in more detail. But in terms of sustainable growth, it's about having a clear value proposition that comes back to your why, and it comes back to having a plan of who it is that you're going to be working with and who is it you're not going to be working with, and we're going to be covering that too. There's the efficiency piece, which obviously we know is incredibly important, all right? This idea of high-performing teams introducing new systems. By the way, don't get confused by systems being technology only. Just new systems is just new ways of looking at things, new processes. And then finally, this idea of high-performing teams. 64% of high-performing teams, it's idea of retaining quality staff. And like I said, these numbers are only being pulled and stretched with our recent benchmarking results. Now, I want to go into something that we created quite recently. It's got a really beautiful name, your growth risk control profile. But it's actually really important. And so I want everybody here to take pen and paper, take an opportunity to actually look at the 3 questions I'm going to put on the screen and rate yourself. This is a tool for you to actually have a think about where you sit from a growth perspective, a risk perspective, and a control perspective, or a need for control. This is a tool for you to actually be honest with yourself, for your leadership team or your team members to be honest with themselves, for those particularly that have a large influence on the direction of the business, and for you to be able to facilitate a really robust discussion, fair discussion, because you want to make sure that everybody's on the right. There's no point setting a path down if everybody's got a different plan and everybody's going on a different direction and on a different journey. So this is something that's actually incredibly important. So here we go. Your growth profile. How would you describe your growth ambitions? It's designed to be simple. This is not designed to be war and peace. Are you comfortable with your current rate of growth? Do you need to accelerate your growth rate, or you need to, you want to go for gold, double in size? Your risk. How would you describe your risk appetite? Now, this is for you personally. I said to you at the start, we would be looking at you for where you are now, where your team members and your leadership team are. So how would you describe your risk appetite? I'm comfortable with a level of risk. I'd be comfortable with a greater level of risk, or I'm actually prepared to take a lot more risk in my business. And then finally, in control, how would you describe your desire for control? So it's not important to you, in terms of being in control or being the only person in control through to actually, I can't let anybody take the reins. Take a minute, not even, just to think through where you sit on each of those three categories.
Elise, just a quick question. On the one before, when you said high-performing firms,
Yeah.
what does that mean? Are we talking on compliance, revenue, profit? Like, is there a metric?
It's a really good question. It's more around business growth and revenue, right? Because it's come out. These results came out of or come out of our business banking mainly, and so that's how they define high performance. Although it's a great question because there's lots of different ways that you can slice and dice high performance, and the potential of high performance as well. So it's interesting. I like data as much as the next person, but at the same time, I've seen and worked with some incredibly high performance potential businesses that are not at the scale or efficiency or level of some of the other businesses, but their systems and processes, the way they can articulate their value to clients, the way they interact with their teams, and the way they document their strategy is second to none, and they're going to be there sooner rather than later. All right. So once you've got your G1, R1, 2, 3, G3, whatever, right, in your head, right, I wanted to show you where you can sort of take this. And so feel free to take photos, all that sort of stuff, absolutely. This is essentially how you kind of pull it together and actually how you facilitate a conversation for yourself, but also, more importantly, with your team. If I'm saying to you the importance of documenting strategy is paramount, you want to make sure that all your team are on the same page, right? Around these three, pillars, I guess. So working through them very quickly, although they're relatively self-explanatory, if you've got a high aptitude for growth, a high, you're happy to accept more risk in your business, and you have the need to control, and you don't want to let go of those reins, then go for gold. Push yourself, extend your thinking. Make sure that your BHAG, your big, hairy, audacious goal, is as big as it could possibly be. Yes? Oh, yes. Yep. So just for those that, so there was an article in Money Management in October, you said, around about the differences and the statistics around. So yeah, for those that are interested in that report, it is quite interesting because the firms out there, they're able to leverage real scale and efficiency essentially. That's if you really kind of want to boil it down, they know exactly what it is, who they're serving. We're going to talk about our 4 pillars at the moment in the next piece after this. They know who they're serving, they know what it is that they're actually articulating, they know who they're not serving, they know what they're doing in terms of what decisions they're making, and therefore equally what decisions they want to steer clear of. And it does produce really significant difference in terms of the metrics, their business metrics. And you can see it in the data points. So very, very happy to share all of that with you, with everybody following today's session, 100%. So going back to our GRC scenarios or our growth risk control scenarios, so this idea of, we're still wanting to grow, we still have this high, need for risk, but I don't mind if I'm in control or not. My need for control is much lower, that C1, C2. Well, if you are wanting to accelerate growth, maybe you should have a look at opportunities for cooperation. Right? Now, obviously you can see the other two there. Happy to take questions on this. But as I said, this is a tool for you to facilitate discussions with yourself truthfully about where it is that you want your business to be. It will help you understand the why, about why it is. Because the other thing as well is we have lots of, so a big part of my role is I work very much closely one-on-one with a lot of firms. And I help them with documenting their strategy, with the execution of their strategy. It's a big part of what Macquarie Virtual Advisor Network does. And so it's about making sure that the whole team is on board with all of this and that they actually know that they're all in alignment. The amount of times and the amount of conversations I've had with firms where there's misalignment there from the most basic of things. And so we wanted to create a tool that was able to facilitate a conversation to ensure that everybody was heading in the same direction. How do people feel about this? Is there any questions, thoughts? No? All right. So looking at the time, I wanted to get to our blueprint for advice. Now, this is obviously matches some of the data that I just shared earlier, but these are our 4 pillars and they have been for quite some time and I don't see them changing anytime soon. But this whole idea of making and being able to execute successfully around your business strategy, what it is, documenting it, sharing it with the team. If you've got one other person that you're working with, it does not matter how big or small your firm is, it's about having a deliberate documented strategy. This idea for strong differentiated proposition, right? So making some plans around who it is that you will work with from a client perspective, but probably and equally more, actually probably more importantly, who you won't work with. Because being able to deliver value, you need to be dealing with the same types of people, and that will help with scalability and efficiency. Which then leads into the idea of scalability and efficiency and having this plan for sustainable growth, both organic and inorganic. Right? The amount of firms that we've worked with that want to grow, that want to scale, and we ask them some really basic questions about, okay, you're wanting to merge, you're wanting to acquire, fantastic, why? And they go, oh, we just want to get bigger. I go, is that really a good reason to get bigger? To acquire a business? So going back to the why is actually incredibly important. And then finally, encouraging this culture of ownership, which in itself is huge, right? The example I always give is that team members will always treat something a little bit better if they feel like they own it. They don't necessarily need to own it. It's kind of like the last time you got in a hire car. Guarantee you drove it just a little bit more, gave it a little bit more gusto than you probably do your own car, right? Now, I know that we've only got a short time remaining, but I'm conscious that I've been speaking a lot. I'd love to just take, honestly, 2 minutes with the person next to you, because you don't often get to spend, like only the breaks, etc., that you get this kind of networking opportunity. These are our 4 pillars, right? I believe in them thoroughly, not just from a research perspective, but because I live and breathe them and I speak about them with my clients every day, all day. I know that they enhance and they're the reason why firms and the best firms that we've worked with, or some of the best firms out there, they've got a deliberate strategy around all 4 of these pillars. I know that every single one of you in this room has a success story at least around one of these pillars, something that you're incredibly proud of that you've achieved in your business or with your team or as part of a team. I want to give you 2 minutes, 3 minutes maybe, to share with the person next to you something that you've achieved that you're really proud of. Go. Okay. All right, now I've got the hard job of like trying to draw everybody back. I need a dinger. All right, guys, stop talking. Mark, you're a legend, thank you. It's always a risk. It's a really risky game, like letting a group of advisors like loose talking to one another. All right. Hopefully you've at least started some conversations that you're able to now to continue into the break, because I know how important it is, the networking piece. And the connecting with our peers piece is. And so having a really pointed question to speak to, hopefully will have started some really fantastic conversations. Was there anything that anybody wanted to share in particular that they feel that the room was going to get something out of? Because like I said, all this stuff comes from me. Sorry, from you, not from me. Whoops. So anything that anybody wanted to share? Oh, me? Yeah. Well, I've got a story for you. No, come on, guys. I'm seriously, there's got to be something that that somebody has done some pretty astounding, really special work that kind of falls under either documenting their strategy and executing on it, their CVP, their scalability, or their team. Yes, I see a hand.
We have an excellent advisory board we do every quarter.
Yep, so an advisory board every quarter, yep.
Yeah, so Excel is our business, and they come in once a quarter. We do a 2-hour boardroom session where we update our quarterly plan, our business plan, and hold us accountable to that plan.
Fantastic. So the advisory board, are they clients or are they just people in the industry that held you accountable to the execution of the plan?
Yeah, just sort of some high-performing clients.
High-performing clients, so important. Amazing. When did you start your advisory board?
12 months ago, so we just did our fourth one last week.
Fantastic. How's it going?
Fantastic, yeah.
Yeah. Has it dramatically changed the feel of the business, the direction of the business?
Yeah, so we always were pretty good at making a plan, but often our review of that plan might have been pushed from 3 months to 5 months or things like that. You let business get in the way.
Yep, so ad hoc reviewing rather than being diligent about it, yep.
Yeah, but we have this locked in, we know it's coming up, we have to get serious about it on the lead up. So, we've made very good steps and had very good pearls of wisdom every time.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing. I think a round of applause. That's amazing. I love advisory boards. I think they're fantastic. It kind of really keeps you in touch with what your clients are really wanting, and it holds you accountable. Because at the end of the day, part of my role is to hold my clients, you all accountable for what it is that you want to achieve as well. But nobody's going to hold you more accountable than your clients. That's awesome. Anybody else want to share anything? Yeah.
I met Julie and she's pretty much started a business from scratch, had nothing. I think that's just outstanding.
Amazing.
Sell it to a subsidiary from Macquarie. And then her number one tip was if you were to go to a financial planning firm, do the filing because you can find out a lot about them.
There you go. Number one tip, do the filings. There you go. Thank you so much. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for having those conversations with such gusto. And like I said, I really hope that there's some connections there, that you weren't just sitting next to somebody that you work with, but that you can continue to have these discussions, because I know how vital and important they are. So I want to move now on to this whole idea of defining your strategy. And I was doing some doodlings before my session, my musings, if you will. And so I want to share with you another really sexy name, the strategy management system. And so, look, this is not my work. This is the work of Mr. Kaplan, Robert Kaplan. And so, look, at the end of the day, I think most people in this room have seen something similar to this, all right? It's like the whole, it's cyclical in nature. Define what you want your business to be, execute, and then refine. And then it's just continues to cycle through. But I want to give some real colour to some of these points, all right? Now, I want to read out some thoughts of mine around what they mean. So I'm going to ask you some rhetorical questions, right? Around when you hear people talk about defining your strategy, all right? I want to ask you some thoughts and some questions. So think about it for yourself, jot them down. Happy to share these with you afterwards on more than just my notepad. But so for example, when you're defining your strategy, so when was the last time that you considered any sort of environmental factors in your strategic plan? Whether that be global events or what's happening in the current market, or are you completely siloed on what it is that you want to achieve? No right or wrong here, just some thoughts. What is your network like? And how often do you speak to other people in the industry or even outside of our industry and road test it and stress test your strategy with them, even with your team? Are you reviewing your strategy regularly, or is it ad hoc? And then the why question. Why? Why are you in business? Why do you get out of bed every day? When was the last time you asked that question to yourself? When was the last time you had that conversation with the people that are important in making decisions with you about your business? When you're talking about translating the strategy, what are the business's top 3 priorities? And my favourite question out of this, what have you decided not to work on as a team? Not everybody talks about what they want to work on. We're going to work on these 18 things. Oh yeah, okay. I'm sure you're going to deliver all 18 as well. What have you decided as a team not to work on? Because your decision to not work on something, or your decision to not do something, not work with a certain type of client, is just as important, if not more important, than your decision to work on something. And can you be sure that everybody in your team is not working on that thing? Right? What are the measurable results that you're actually tracking? If you can't measure it, it's not happening. Right? And who is actually accountable? Who is the one person for every project that you are working on in your team that is ultimately accountable for its success? In other words, who is the sponsor? For those change managers in the room. Because I know there's so many people that love change management. When you think about executing with purpose, another one I love, would all of your team agree on what the priorities in the business are? And not just the leadership team, would all the people in the team agree on what the priorities are? So if you're working on 2 or 3 priorities, because they're going to turn the dial for your business and for your clients and for where you're ultimately trying to get to in scale, efficiency, growth, profitability, revenue, whatever it is that is your main focus, is everybody heading in the same direction, and can you be sure of that?
Please, could you ask that question again?
Yep. Would all of your team agree on what those priorities are? And would they know what they are? So would they know, and would they agree? All right. How many activities are they working on that aren't a priority? Because I can guarantee you, because we see it all the time, the amount of people and the amount of team members, and the bigger a team gets, bigger a business gets, the more things that are happening that people are working on because they think it's important. Right. So I'm having conversations mainly with the leadership teams of businesses, and they've got 80% of their team working on things that are not actually generating any other further output because they're all doing separate things. And this all comes back to not knowing exactly what it is that they're building and why, and having that documented strategy. I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but I cannot stress this enough. All right. And then finally, monitoring and reviewing. All right. Do you have something in the diary now of when you're next going to review your business strategy or your plan or your why with the team together? Right? At least annually. Put it in the diary now. We find we get so seemingly caught up in the urgent and we forget to focus on what's important. Right? Do you separate your operations meetings from your strategy meetings? Again, I cannot tell you how many meetings I've sat in and they're like, come to our strategy session. I go, I would love to. And I get there and it's all operations. I don't earn any favours or fans when I tell them that. Right. Where and how are you getting outside perspective? The fact that you're here is amazing. So this should be your opportunity to get outside perspective. Do you take those outside perspectives back to your business? Do you share them with your team? Do they influence your decision-making processes about where your business is headed? Or do you just get on with being busy? All right. And then, much to my question before, is that if I looked at your calendar, would I see any annual strategic review, check-ins, and probably going to our fourth pillar, times to celebrate or to reinforce certain messages? Right. They're rhetorical questions, but they're important ones, and there's a lot more. Right. You talk about high-performing teams and the successful advice firm of the future. They're already doing this stuff, and they're doing it really well. And that's the really main reason as to why they're actually accelerating their growth. Because every incremental decision that they're making in their business, they're doing in set stages, and they're going and they're pushing forward each time, rather than kind of making a decision and then making a decision and then making a decision, and then it's this kind of cycle. But you feel busy because you're constantly making decisions, but you're just not sure that they're going and taking you in one direction. So there's these three questions: is where is your business at today? Right, I've given you that tool, this idea of the growth risk control profile, to actually have an honest conversation with yourself, in addition to your why conversation with your leadership team and with your actual overall team. You need to know your why. Where do you want your business to be, and why? And going back to my marathon story at the start, what are your realistic strategic options? It's all very well and good saying that, I want to run a marathon in 2 hours. Well, I'm getting old now, and it's not going to happen, right? So, well, not for me, my husband, right? So what are your realistic strategic options? Do they marry up with your why? Do they marry up with your team? I am conscious of time, but I think it's an important one, and I've got a talkative crowd. We've been talking about this, we've seen too often that businesses don't put this kind of rigour around putting time in. They'll never cancel, advisors, businesses will never cancel time with clients, as they shouldn't. But for whatever reason, we'll cancel time to work on our business. And we do it regularly. Why? Why do we cancel? I'm asking you the question. I want some answers. Why do we cancel the time to work on our business?
Because it's the tyranny of the urgent over the important.
That's it, yeah. We just get, and by the way, admitting this will actually help us get better at stopping doing it, which is why I'm making you and forcing you to say it out loud. We get seemingly completely distracted by urgent things, which I'm not saying are not, but they're not going to get you where you need to be, ultimately. I heard somebody else say something. Oh, they've gone shy. What else? Why do we cancel time out of our diary, and why don't we put enough time into our strategic planning process? Because it's hard. Thank you. It is hard. And do you know what? Drawing on my psych, here, we get really disillusioned by when we think something should be easy and it's not. We're more likely to put it down because it makes us feel a bit stupid. And I'm not. This is just human biology, right? I watched my 2-year-old, my 4-year-old do the same thing. They'll try really hard at something if they think that it's like beyond them, but if it's like something that should be really easy, they'll get frustrated really quickly. And I feel like business planning is that. Like you've started a business, you're doing really well, you've got a good level of success. So you start to plan, you want to grow, you sit down with your pen and paper and you go, I'll do this tomorrow. Right? It's hard. It is hard. What else? Yep. The answer there was you need to be in the right mindset to actually be able to come up with the thoughts and ideas for you to actually action. You're absolutely right. Again, I go back to my husband's marathon story. He couldn't run at night. He was too drained. Right? So it would be silly to put in strategic planning sessions at the wrong time of day, the wrong time of the year. You've got to be realistic to what's actually going to work for you, for your team. Absolutely. Lack of accountability. Get yourself an accountability partner if you don't have one. It can be anybody. Just to check in on you. Accountability is hard, right? It's got to be somebody that is actually going to hold you accountable. And if that's not yourself, because a lot of people it's not, sometimes it's business partners, sometimes it's their family, sometimes it's a coach, sometimes it's another business. Find yourself an accountability partner. They do work. All right, I'm looking at the time. I want to share this with you, all right? Our playing to win strategy. Look, there's so many different strategies out there that you can look at, right? This is not the only one. We like it because it's simple, all right? And it's pretty self-explanatory. And like I said, I'm happy to share all of this document, all of this detail with you. What is your winning aspiration? What is it that you want to achieve personally, but also as a business, all right? Then decide where you'll play. Now, whether that be geographically, what service lines, where is it that you're going to be playing, right? How are you going to win, right? What's your CVP? Why would clients choose you over someone else? You need to be able to articulate that. Then finally, what capabilities must we have as a team? That's sort of your talent pool, your culture. And then what management systems and tech stack do we need to be able to deliver that, right? So if I kind of make it pretty, sort of semi-pretty, right? What do you want your business to be? What are your realistic strategic options? But then also looking at about where is your business at today, right? I want to share with you before we wrap up an example of one of our businesses that we've done a lot of work with over the years, and now it's obviously we've pulled some things out of it because we don't want to highlight who it is for privacy reasons, but take a photo of it. This is it. This is strategy on a page. It doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be War and Peace. It doesn't have to be a 30-page strategy document, but it needs to be in existence. And it needs to be written down, and it needs to be reviewed, and it needs to be agreed upon. I promise you, and you can come at me with your knives and your pitchforks afterwards, that you will see a dramatic difference in your business if you actually pull out what's in your head and in your leadership team's head, put it on a page, all agree to it. Because all of a sudden, all of those decisions that you make on a daily basis, that you're making with no kind of real candour or care or concern, because they just need to be made now, will all start to draw back, how does that fit into our strategic plan? Does this new shiny tech piece of technology fit in with what it is that we're actually trying to achieve? Or does it just look pretty? It seems silly. I have these conversations daily, right? Write it down. And so finally, I've got 6 tips for you, nothing that you wouldn't have heard before. Right? Hopefully you've already got your golden nuggets out of this. But take the time to understand yourself, your why, and your business partners. Right? What is it that you're trying to achieve? Where is your business at right now? Right? And what about the people around you? Right? Number 2, create the space for these discussions and don't book over it and cancel it out and push it out. This is the most important decisions that you will make to create time and space for these discussions and thinking in your business. Because everything else will fall out of this. Your CVP will happen, your tech stack will happen, because all of a sudden you have the information you need to make the best decisions possible, because you're making it with a goal and a destination in mind that everybody agrees to. Someone has to own the strategy. There has to be one person. Obviously the business owns it, but it has to be driven by someone. If you've got a big business, Pick someone. The CEO, the COO, it doesn't matter. It could be you yourself if it's a smaller practice. It could be, as long as they've got some level of accountability and sponsorship in the business, but make sure that one person is accountable for it. Because if there's too many people accountable for it, it's going to get messy, right? Please write it down. Right? I'm a big believer in this. Look, I'm not suggesting that I am the biggest tech head. In fact, I'm really not. But at the same time, I know for a fact that if you don't take the time to write something down, it's so much harder to actually sit with a pen and paper. Lots of people say this to me, I've got a strategy, it's in my head. If it doesn't exist on paper, it doesn't exist. Okay? Right? Because I promise you, try and write it down. It'll be so much harder to get it on paper, right? So write it down. Leverage your networks. Use these sorts of situations at Congress. Use your ability to connect with other people in our industry, outside of our industry, to test and learn. And please review. The cycle never, ever stops. Just because you've done your strategy now doesn't mean, oh, I'm done, I don't have to look at it again. Right? It needs to be reviewed. Thank you so much for your attention, your participation in today's session. I've loved every minute of it. I will be around following today, and at the speaker stand and floating around as I normally do. Thank you so much. Enjoy your lunch.